I understand that there was not a 911 board meeting this morning, so that's kind of the explanation for why it's such a thin house out there. So anyway, can I have a roll call of the members present, please?
All right, Jeff Swearingen. Patrick Updike.
Present.
Peter Huffman. Marty Smith.
Present.
Tom Lampy. John Benson. Jeff Franklin.
Present.
Andy Buffington.
Present.
Ellen Hagan.
Present.
Michelle Bischoff. She's not here. David Ness.
Here.
Jason Leonard.
Here.
Rob Rotter. Michael Casper.
Here.
Carol Lund Smith. Larry Smith.
Present on the phone.
And Angela Clauser. And we do have a quorum.
All right. Introduction of board members. I'll start with a board member that's on the phone. Larry, go ahead.
Larry Smith, Topeka County Emergency Management.
Okay. Is there any other board members on the phone that jumped in late? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Buffington.
Andy Buffington, Winnebago and Hancock Emergency Management Communications, representing communication centers.
Marty Smith, Iowa Department of Public Health.
Jeff Franklin, Director and State CIO.
Jason Leonard from the Waverly Police Department.
Chris Myers on the SWIC.
Patrick Updike, Iowa Department of Corrections.
Mike Casper, Lynn County Sheriff's Office.
Ellen Hagan, volunteer firefighters.
Angela Clauser, Panorama Schools.
All right. Thank you. If all had a chance to look at today's agenda, could I entertain a motion, please?
So moved, Buffington.
Okay. Thank you, Andy. Second. Thank you, Ellen. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. All right. Moving on to the meeting minutes. We've had a chance to actually look over the meeting minutes, everybody. If you have, I'll entertain a motion for acceptance, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, Marty. It's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion on the meeting minutes? All right. All those in favor of passing the meeting minutes indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. All right. Chris, SWIC report.
Yeah, really quickly, just a housekeeping item or two. There is a memorial card for Sally Hall out front, so if you want to sign that to show your support for her and her family and her close friends, that card is over there for signing. Down to business. For those of you that are committee members, you probably saw an email come out from me earlier this week regarding a skip refresher that we're going to undertake this summer and this fall. You may remember that we updated our skip in 2017. We adopted it, I think it was, in December or November of 2017. So there's still some shelf life left on it. But there's been some changes since we've adopted it. Previously, that skip was aligned with the 2014 revision of the National Emergency Communications Plan. Part of the refresh is going to bring bring it in line with the 2019 update of the NECP, which we were involved with at many levels. We had a couple of members of our various board and committees call in. Rob Dennert and Wally Walzer called in a couple of times. Blake DeRucci, our State 911 program manager, was in on those calls as well, as was I. And so that document was recently accepted at the NICSWIC and SAFECOM meeting and endorsed. So the work that's going to be ongoing with that skip refresher is just some minor adjustments to bring it in alignment with the 2019 NECP. And we're also going to go through some of our goals and metrics and objectives and action steps in Appendix B and in some of the main body of the document, just to make sure that they're still current, they're still applicable, or if we've accomplished some of those goals, maybe add something new. One thing that comes to mind is that operations committee will, by the end of this year, have one of their goals achieved of having 95% or better of PSAPs having connections to Isicsb for at least basic interoperability. So the time seems to be right just to do a minor refresh on that skip. It doesn't have to be an overhaul, but just to update a little bit of the language to reflect the current landscape with Isicsb now being here and FirstNet, and also update those goals seems prudent, and also bring it into alignment with the new NECP. Some more updates. If you recall back to that encryption paper we accepted a while back, that will be up for discussion at the next P25 Steering Committee and P25 UNS meeting here in Des Moines. That's happening next week. That'll be on Thursday, so it'll be exciting to see some of our labor be discussed on a national level locally. We're also looking at having some presentations from some local interoperability stakeholders at those meetings as well. So that'll be a pretty good meeting, the way it's shaping up, and that'll be next week here in downtown Des Moines. Some more housekeeping items related to the Isicsb platform in general. Status board. We got the review of the agreement with Minnesota back from our Iowa AG representative, Jeff Peter Zellick. He suggested some revisions and changes to it, and those have been sent back to Minnesota. I've been in contact with Minnesota this past week, on again and off again, and they're going to hopefully have something back to me by Friday on whether or not they like the suggested revisions, any more suggested changes they may have. The main change revolved around changing it from a joint powers agreement to a simple MOU. And the reasoning behind that was this is just a one-time exchange of source code. There's no joint powers that are being exercised across the state border. So it seems like it may be cleaner and easier just to make it an MOU saying we're giving this to you for free, just don't do anything for profit off of it, and everything will be copacetic. So that was the primary revision for that was presented by our AG representative. So we'll see what Minnesota says later this week. Interstate interoperability, those meetings are expected to kick off again as we're moving into Q3. We tend to have one of those a quarter. Just a heads up for our stakeholders in Western Iowa, we may postpone the one with Nebraska due to the flooding out there. They've got other things to keep in mind at this point, so we're going to work around that quite a bit. We have some meetings coming up scheduled with Missouri, Illinois, and Wisconsin and Minnesota again. When it comes to Minnesota, we're actually going to start talking more about brass tacks policy, and I think one of the big things we're going to talk about is what do we want interstate pursuits to look like. And from there, once we have a semblance of where that may go, I think that's going to give us some more guidance on how things are done with other states that surround us. Illinois, we are very close to having an agreement with them. They wanted to do an MOU as opposed to some of the other states that said, hey, just a simple letter of acknowledgement that we're going to do this is fine. Illinois wanted a fairly sizable and substantial MOU to kind of outline what we're doing. And we've got that to the point where both states have looked at it at a local committee level. It was passed on to governance to look at also. Governance recommended sending it to the AG's office. AG reviewed it, gave the green stamp of approval. And now at this point, it's going through the process, starting in Iowa probably next month, of going through governance again for approval and up to the board for adoption and approval. And it's going to go through the similar process in Illinois with their interoperability committees as well. So we're making good progress. Wisconsin, we got some draft suggested language back on the agreement between our two states. That'll be reviewed at the next interstate meeting as well. And we'll see what comes from that, but things are moving in a good direction overall. I think this has been an initiative that was good to undertake. And based on some meetings that I've been in with some national committees, is that this type of work is becoming more and more common across the country as we start looking at expanding our interoperable capabilities, both with technology, but also with policy and governance and standards and usage. The concept of this being a pretty big world is becoming more and more prominent, and that concept of who you want to work with on a daily basis is growing. So we're taking a definite step in the right direction with that. A couple other final things of note. I was invited to participate in some committees within SAFECOM and DHS. One is an update to the SAFECOM continuum. To rope this back into some work that we did on our 2017 skip, you may remember that we took the SAFECOM continuum and modified it slightly to fit kind of what we felt was necessary. that effort got out as far as some discussions on what we've done. A couple of other states have done some similar things now and said, hey, the SAFECOM Continuum was last published in 2004. It's got 15 years worth of mileage on it now. Let's start modifying it so it fits our needs a little bit more concisely. At the national level, they've recognized this also that, hey, it's time to update this thing. So that work has started. And a lot of the things that we're doing within Iowa at this point will probably end up being in that national continuum update as well. You start looking at some of our efforts that are ongoing with interstate interoperability and kind of where we want to take it next with possibly federal agencies. That will likely end up in the next modified version of the continuum, because if you remember with the 2004 version of that, it basically stopped at intra-state and regional interoperability. It didn't look beyond a state border. So the work we're doing is already in alignment with what's going on at a national level. So that's very positive to see. One final thing that I was invited to participate in is a data interoperability group. I think this will be especially important as more public safety broadband applications come forth that utilize networks like FirstNet. And then also as you start getting into more of the more location-centric things like CAD to CAD interoperability, I think all this is going to start roping into that data interoperability group. So we've got some good work that's going, that's making the operating picture for a lot of people hopefully a lot better in the long term. So that is my report for the month. I'll go ahead and take any questions.
I have a question, Chris. I know that when we're talking about the Isicsb platform and sharing with other states, I know that Worth County on the northern border is stuff from Minnesota. I don't know if anybody else knows that as well, but do you know of any other counties or users that are out there for the Isicsb platform or sharing with other states and how that's going?
Not directly at this point. I know that there has been significant interest from neighboring states about getting something like a consulate or control station in their PSEP so that they can listen to what's going on here. The thing that I've heard repeatedly from say law enforcement that's in the field is that, you know, if they've ever got something going on, there may be times where they need someone from the other state to be there to offer assistance because they would be the next closest person, but they have no way of getting in touch with them. So while I don't necessarily have any direct knowledge of any more counties doing something like that at this point, I know that there's an interest based on the size of the meetings, especially with Minnesota and the one we had with Missouri. And I know that there's some more people that are starting to have those discussions as well.
I just know that there's several individuals in law enforcement that on those bordering counties and stuff, they talk with those other officers just like they do with a bordering county here in the state.
Yep.
So a lot of their, if they can't pick up the radio and talk to them, obviously they're going to pick up their cell phone and do
Yep.
it. So just looking for something a little bit easier to do that when you have an incident that involves radio traffic.
Yeah. And that's the end game, is to make it just as easy as turning the dial on the radio.
Right. So it's growing. It's good. All right. Any other questions for Chris? All right. Moving, I don't believe we'll probably have a 911 council report. So moving on to UGC, Chair Buffington.
All right, thank you. I was unable to attend the UGC meeting due to response last month or 3 weeks ago. But what was reviewed, thanks to Vice Chair Dennert to take over that for me. Some of the things that we looked at is we didn't have any applications. We have a few pending. You'll see in this new process form that it goes to Motorola first as far as the applicant participation plan. They'll have 30 days to review. That's one of the things that the UGC did was that they reviewed and approved a applicant process form that really falls in line with what we've been doing all this time. What we've added, and I alluded to a couple months ago, was we're going to be having an engineer or someone with a vendor do a loading analysis to make sure that there's nothing going on that would potentially disrupt the system. We're waiting very patiently, and I'd like to thank Polk County specifically for waiting for more than 5 weeks now for some sort of answer from Motorola, as well as the city of Cedar Rapids. After today, with this new process, we're giving Motorola 30 days. They're going to get the applicant participation plan as soon as I receive it, and then they have 30 days. Failure to to do anything or start the process or request more time or anything like that is going to be essentially implied consent to move forward and to approve. So that's one of the things we looked at. And we have 3 letters from Minnesota, South Dakota, and Missouri about basically coming into agreement for interstate interoperability. So exciting things on that front. So if there's no questions, that ends my report.
Any questions for Andy? All right, moving on. Chair Hagan, can I have the finance, please?
And I do have it. Monthly expenditures during May for the Interoperable and Broadband Communication Fund were $16,745. The May ending balance is $168,685. Monthly expenditures during May for SlickP 2.0 were $8,269. Of that amount, $6,615 were federal expenditures, and the remaining federal amount available from the grant is $88,924. Are there any questions? That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on to Governance Committee, I know that John emailed me this morning saying that he was going to attend the funeral this morning, but he might jump on the line. John, are you on the line yet? If not, hearing none, I'll defer to Captain Ness.
The Governance Committee met on the 3rd of June and reviewed 3 new standards, one of which was tabled for a little more attention, and the other 2 are on the agenda for new business. I'll entertain any questions.
All right, look forward to hearing from you later. The Operations Committee Chair Bischoff is not here either, so Chris has graciously said he'd take care of it, so go ahead.
She's on a plane heading back to Iowa right now. So the Operations Committee met last month, and actually now they're meeting twice a month. This is something that was discussed for a while about, well, maybe there's enough workload now where we could start meeting twice a month, much like the Technology Committee does, just to make sure that we keep things on track and we keep the meeting times down to a manageable amount. So they're now meeting on the 1st and 3rd Wednesdays of every month. So they'll discuss things as necessary with that. At the most recent set of meetings they had, they discussed air-to-ground channels and specific policy requirements around those. There's been some cross discussions with technology on that as well to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And I think they're coming towards a resolution very nicely with that. Operations also looked at some long-term future goals of the board that kind of revolve around what we want to do with the system and locals and such, and kind of how we would like to see this thing grow. Of course, that's tied to some funding opportunities as well, maybe down the road, and they kind of reviewed that, offered some constructive feedback to the groups that are planning that, and they'll be reviewing that over the next couple of weeks as well. They continue to work on developing proposals and plans for legacy systems, and they want to have a document that's ready to go at the next Operations Committee meeting if possible. We'll see where that goes, and depending on how that document is received and what revisions are suggested for that, it may be up for board viewing and approval possibly in the next couple of months. And some of those legacy systems would include such as what would it look like for continued use and kind of expansion use of Isicsb and legacy things that are in existence like VLAW. How does that new world look now where we've got that simplex channel that a lot of law enforcement uses, and then we've also got the statewide interoperability system in the mix. So starting to look at some things with that. On the topic of FirstNet, they had some webinars that are being looked at for uplifting users during events and disasters, and also how local control looks with FirstNet with the portals for people that have that service. They're going to give a brief overview of the board through and that, and also there'll be a subcommittee meeting where they go really down into detail with that, and that'll be a statewide offering at some point as well. In addition to some of the FirstNet stuff that they've been looking at and discussing, that also cross-pollinates slightly with the FirstNet subcommittee, the consulates and control station grant for PSAPs. Deputy Swick Walzer worked really hard to get those programmed a couple of weeks ago, and we're delivering them now. My understanding is that all of the RAGBRAI counties currently have them, so that's good. We've had some successful integrations so far. And in total, we have 37 that have been delivered to locals or are about to be delivered. We've got some people that are offering to pick up multiple of those consulates or control stations and then run them over to their neighboring PSAPs. So we've got 37 of them out the door so far, and a couple of more may go out today and tomorrow. So we're making progress with this. That is the basic gist of the operations report.
Any questions for Chris? It's a lot of info. The Operations Committee obviously is going to need to meet twice a month. So thank you for all the work. Outreach, Chair Hagan.
I asked Tom Lampy if I should attend the Region 7 First Responder Network Authority, and he said yes. And boy, am I glad I did. I understood it. It's like, oh my, that is so nice. And it was eye-opening what we can do. Rob Dennard talked about how he's using their Des Moines areas, using the FirstNet, and talked about the apps that are out there, that apps are not restricted by FirstNet. There's a catalog of approved apps that they know are secure, et cetera, et cetera. 72 deployables that are available nationwide. 2 drones are part of that. So that was interesting. And how the band 14 works, the 20 spectrum and all that good stuff. And 102 devices will work on it. And that the Black Sim's always looking for band 14 first and going on down the line. And those of you that were there, anything else that highlights you think of? And our committee continues to send out outreach information. Thank you.
Would you think some of the, Chris and Ellen, would you think that some of the issues and stuff that the Operations Committee has actually been working on could be put out by outreach with the control stations and consulates and stuff that are getting put out there? I mean,
I think that would certainly be fitting to include, say, the rollout of the consulates and control stations to PSAP and the status of that. There's certainly some things that could go out also. What comes to mind that I may have omitted during the operations report was the statewide test calls. We're looking at doing one of those in early July for the RAGBRAI counties and then doing some others for the rest of them in early August.
Right.
That's something that could certainly go out in the outreach letter as well.
I think that would be something to get together on to make sure that when information goes out, it needs to. So. Thanks, Ellen. FirstNet, Sean. Purple shirt. Looks good on you.
Thank you, sir. Not here for the fashion contest today, but maybe next time.
Look good though.
Thank you, Marty. So I don't have a big update. Helen gave a great update over the FirstNet forum. All the feedback we've received to this point has been very positive. We're waiting for FirstNet to send out a survey to get your feedback directly for all the registrants. I know Mike was there as well, and Marty was there, and so hopefully you felt the same way. We're getting ready to do the RIC 2 outreach, so that's the first regional outreach we've done in quite a while. That's going to happen June 25th from 1:30 to 4:30 in Mason City. You've hopefully seen the messages already going out. We have at least 8 people registered already, if not more. So we look for that to be very positive. It's going to be kind of a mini overview of what happened at the regional forum, but more catered toward RIC 2. RIC 5, we're looking at hopefully doing soon. It's just with crunch time coming, the holiday, state fair, we're working as best we can with Larry Smith and to see whatever we can do over there, coordinating a location, getting all that stuff on the books. Other than that, we had an update on the website. Nothing that you would see. It was all behind the scenes for security and everything else. And then we brought our test site up to match our production so that we have better testing capabilities. And that's pretty much it for my update. Any questions?
What were the dates on the RIC 2 outreach?
RIC 2 is on the 25th from 1:30 to 4:30 in the Mason City, I believe it's the Mason City Hall. That will also be in the newsletter, and whatever you have for the newsletter for outreach, I'll happily take. We usually send it out on the Tuesday or the Wednesday after the board meeting. So if you have updates, I'm always looking for material, always. I usually depend a lot on the AT&T folks for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Do you have the committee report for Carol, for the training?
Yes.
Committee? Yes. All right, moving on to training committee.
Yep. So training committee, we are working on getting the socialization out for the PSAP cybersecurity webinar and the ComT. Those have been posted to the HSCMD training website. We got a little bit of a crash course on getting those things posted there, so those are on the HSCMD website now. Awaiting on some official word, we did resubmit the ComL request to ECD, so we're waiting for some official word and decision on that. And then also they reviewed the training materials for the consulates that are going out. The standards packets that has all of the Isicsb standards as of May 1st, and the guidance PowerPoints that we've included as well. Those guidance PowerPoints are just basically designed to be a very quick crash course in the concept that we're kind of shooting for with the standards. So the thought process behind that is, okay, what are the boots on the ground standards we have, and how do we condense them down in such a way that if someone wanted a really quick and dirty overview of what they had to do or what the concept was, they could open up those PowerPoints and see what we're doing, why we're doing it, and when to do it, and what the end result should be. And then that was approved at the training committee level as well. So those training documents, as far as the small condensed PowerPoints, are going out with all the consulates and control stations in addition to that standard packet. So that was basic work of the training committee last month. We'll have hopefully some news next month on more attendees and registrants for our ComL, our ComT class in the PSAP cybersecurity webinar. Offhand, I believe we have about 5 that are signed up for the ComT so far, which is excellent. The minimum attendance is 8. That will be held in Clarinda, so it's in the southwestern part of Iowa, but we had a significant interest in that class being there, which is also part of the reason why we had 5 applicants sign up within the first 36 hours. And then the cybersecurity webinar, I believe we have about 35 PSAPs that have signed up for that so far. I would encourage us to get more. So if you have a PSAP that you're tied to, or know some people that are tied to PSAPs, encourage them to sign up. We really want to try to get the word on this cybersecurity webinar out and get as many people signed up as possible so that we can start learning about what the actual cybersecurity threats are to PSAPs and how to plan for them, how to recognize threats, and then if we have to, how to mitigate them, and also who to call.
Very good. Any questions for the technology, or I'm sorry, the training committee? Chris? All right, Patrick, what's going on with technology committee?
We're going to do this like Karnak, where you ask the questions first.
Pretty much.
Okay, well, any questions? Technology met on the 30th of May, I believe, and the 4th of June. I also attended the operations call and the finance call. The purpose for joining the finance committee is what you're going to see in agenda item 21, new business. So when we get to that, you'll see what that's all about. We keep revisiting the air to ground channels, and I know our committee members are a little tired of talking about it, but you know, it's one of those things that I don't want to put that information out there and not have some type of game plan for it. You know, it's one thing to license it, but then to just hand it out to everybody to use, I don't think is a good idea, and that's why we've been through the regional planning idea. So in the conversations with operations, they didn't think it was a really good idea to regionalize it. And I did say to them, well, if you don't, at least come up with a policy/procedure that outlines what you're going to do with these channels. and at least consider the regional plan as a backup plan in the event that something goes sour on you. So I think that's probably where it's headed, but time will tell. So the end result was most of the technology members just said, let's just move on, get this done. And so we've kind of kicked it to operations to let them come up with a policy or procedure that says how that's all going to be handled. We know one thing's for sure, the NIFOG handbook already has a landing zone channel designated, so we don't have to worry about, that wording. So we've spent a lot of time on this subject, and hopefully we can get this licensing done and move on. So that's about it.
Yep. No, I fully understand. You've been spending a lot of time in the A to G, A to G stuff for many months actually. So, All right. Any questions for Patrick? Okay. Obviously Michelle's not here, so Chris, you're going to take over the FirstNet Broadband
Yes,
Committee Chair?
she sent me notes for both.
Good.
So I touched on a little bit before with the Operations Committee. They're going to go pretty full bore. They met on Tuesday, and they talked about a lot of things with FirstNet. A lot more tower sites are being deployed, which I'm sure that will be covered by Dustin here during his report. But as far as the concept of webinars for uplifting and local control, that's been something that has been asked about repeatedly over time by users, not just in Iowa or potential users in Iowa, but by users in other states and by other states. How that's going to work, what it actually looks like, what's the actual step, and who do you call if you have to uplift someone during an event so that they get a higher level of priority and access to FirstNet. So the thought process here is that a webinar would be good, but there's some very technical things behind this concept. And there's different audiences that want to know different things. And this is something that obviously the board may be interested in, but it doesn't have to be at the technical level for the board to see kind of how things are laid out and how it works. So we're going to have up to 3 webinars. One is a brief overview for the board on what the portal is, basically what it does, how to find it, and then just some general ideas of functionality of what to use, when to use, why to use, things like that. At the subcommittee level, within the FirstNet Broadband Subcommittee, we're going to get down pretty far into the weeds on some of this stuff. What does that priority elevation actually look like? What does it do for other users that may already be on FirstNet and using applications? Pros and cons of elevation of priority and de-elevation of priority. When do they notice it? How long does it take to go throughout the system? Really, really, nitty-gritty detail type stuff. And then at some point, we're going to hopefully offer a third webinar that'll be a statewide offering for interested stakeholders to participate in. This could be agencies that are already using FirstNet. This could be agencies that are thinking about using FirstNet, or it could just be those that have an operational need to know of how this may work if they're interoperating with a neighbor of theirs who is using FirstNet. So those are the 3 webinars that are currently being discussed for delivery to the FirstNet Broadband Subcommittee, to the board itself, so that they have an idea of what's going on, and then also the general populace of stakeholders. FirstNet is also, or the FirstNet Subcommittee is also researching some sort of methodology to figure out what does this landscape actually look like as far as what people are using for broadband. And this kind of ropes back into this concept that we've talked about on and off for a while now of if and when we develop an Iowa field operations guide, it would be pretty cool if we had a section in there for broadband data. Applications people are using, who their service provider is, just things like that. So if someone is going from point A to point B to work a disaster, they have a reasonable expectation of what to expect when they get to their destination. So the end game of this is to figure out not only who's using what, but also start working on our deployment strategies and operational plans so that we better accomplish the mission. And also, if we have to do a deployable, what type of deployable is actually needed? It may not make sense to send a deployable out with FirstNet connected devices if everybody in that area is already connected to FirstNet, right? They may need something else entirely. So it will help us with typing and planning for that type of deployment. They also look to continue the momentum they've already gained on starting more open and constructive dialogue with FirstNet. The improvement over the past 6 months has been absolutely phenomenal. And then they really want to keep that going by not only just looking at kind of what FirstNet is, how it works technically, and things you could do with it, but okay, let's start seeing some more success stories. There's some very well published success stories of how public safety broadband and FirstNet can be used in large scale events like the Super Bowl 51 After Action report from Houston. That was a very comprehensive look at how they use broadband data to accomplish their mission and be more efficient with some resources in many cases. And then also start looking at what are our future desired features to the network. What we have now is good. It's a good starting point, but we don't necessarily know how the communications ecosystem, how needs of our users and how needs of the public are going to evolve over time. So having a continued open discussion with AT&T and FirstNet about how things are evolving is also important. And those are some of the things that we've kind of picked up steam on in the past several months, and we hope to continue as a subcommittee. So that's the report.
Thank you. Questions on that? I'm sure that we can ask several of you actually for questions on that, answers for that. I know that Sheriff Rotter and Sheriff Stufflebeam are not here for the LEA committee either. Do you have that report?
I am here for, this is Connie, I'm here for the LEA report. I'm sorry I'm not there in person.
That's okay, Connie, go ahead.
We continue to talk about the standards for the talk group and the consulate setups and the systems in that fashion. We're working not only with Swick-Myers on the standards that the standards committees have put together, but also with Michelle with the operations committee, so we can work together to make sure it's the best standards for all the way around. We continue to work with the CCGW 4-wire project, which is tying together the old huts and the new huts so that we can remove the unreliable telephone circuits. We continue to have problems with them every month. There was one discussion on with the consulates when they come out, how will the PSAPs know how to patch, and all of that is going to be provided in training, along with the ability that the state dispatch centers will be able to patch for the counties, and that was discussed at length. So there was a lot of anxiety release that way. And like Swick-Myers had mentioned, the distribution of the consulates to the PSAPs in the RAGBRAI group is moving forward right along with the training, and there will be some training videos that are going to be produced, and we are still working on those. We are also trying to get the word out to all the RICs, and because Swick-Myers does attend those RIC meetings, he is going to make sure that all those updates are brought to them through the monthly meetings. Is there any other questions that I might be able to address?
No other questions? Thank you, Connie.
Okay, thank you.
All right, moving on to other reports. Any information sharing amongst board members? Okay. Melvin, you're up. Motorola Project Manager.
Good morning. I know last time I came, I didn't use a computer, but I figured it's time for some pictures. Right, everybody can see it? All righty. So as I mentioned before, actions are getting shorter and shorter, and some of the items in the list become repetitive because they haven't been resolved yet. Again, we still remain to complete the Hardin site, but we're waiting for some answers from the city of Iowa Falls so we can proceed. So we've done everything we can do to the site. The remaining, we just need to wait for the agreement to be in place to be able to complete that. That's landscaping, a retention wall, and stuff like that. So we're still working with the city, but we're waiting for some answers in that one.
They're not returning my calls anymore.
We're in the same boat.
Tried it again.
Correct. So we can't quite do anything until we get some answers, so we're kind of a little bit at a loss as to what to do right now. Right, the next one is the Start Rock Rapids construction. So we have some agreements. One of the things that we had to do, which took a little bit longer, was we had to do, it sounds odd, but remember that we're doing a twin tower. So we're building a new tower and then we're tearing down the old tower. In order to tear down the old tower, we actually have to beef it up so we can tear it down. So that's because part of the tear down process involves attaching some items to the tower itself so then we can gen pull and pull some things down out of the tower. So we performed a structural analysis of the tower. They provided us what they call a rigging plan, which says here's where we're going to put the pulleys, this is how this whole thing's going to work. So we have all that stuff in place. They're actually up there staking the site one more time so that we can get boots in the ground and start the process. So we're green to go. It's just a matter, it took quite a while to get there because everybody had to be in agreement to be able to do this. We completed the software refresh at every backhaul node. That was important. This was different than the P25 network upgrade, which we've already completed. This was really more about the backhaul, the MPLS network that supports the P25 system. So we had to go and upgrade every node. In essence, every place where there is a microwave radio, there's an MPLS router, so we had to go and touch every box. And that meant resetting the box, taking 5 minutes to reset every box, so we've completed that process already. We continue working with the generator startups. Again, we're almost done with those, but that's just one of those things. It takes a little while to get everyone ready and certified, so we're doing pretty well with those as well. And then the coverage testing, which we restarted. So that's the reason I'm with my computer, because I figured I'd show you some pictures. So this is what it looks like right now. Before we had a lot more blue in there. Everything that's green has been coverage tested. So the tiles that are orange is where we have teams right now out in the field. And then the blue with the orange letters, which is basically every blue that's here, is what's follows. So once they come off of the counties that they're working on right now, they'll move on to the blue counties. And then the area and and here up in the northwest corner are the areas that we're going to wait until we get Rock Rapids done. We're actually mulling over maybe doing these two over here, Osceola and O'Brien, and then leaving these two for when Rock Rapids gets done. We haven't made up our minds yet on that one. But overall, we've had a lot of folks driving, basically working 12, 14 hours a day, weekends, Saturdays and Sundays. So we've been able to push this really hard, and we've been making a lot of good progress on this. Overall, this map shows you what the analysis is telling us. So we're currently at 99.34%. So we could actually fail about 4 entire counties and still be okay. Not that that's our goal, but
And you won't. Right.
and we won't. You can see the red dots where we get the scattering, right? So you see some over here in this area down here. You see some over here, some over here, some at the edge over here, and up here. Nothing is surprising. Again, a lot of these areas we didn't predict coverage, but we still test it anyway. Because here the goal is to test every tile that we can. If it's reachable, we test it. Areas that we couldn't get into, like down here, it's just all the flooding. We can't access the areas. So we expect what is it, 6 or 7 that are active right now, at least 4 of those to be done by the end of this week. So it's looking like we should be done by the end of next week with all of these, with the remaining. Maybe if we throw in the additional 2, that will overflow, yes.
That map's really encouraging, Melvin. And just so that I remember, because I can't remember this, these are just the state-built sites, right? These don't
Correct.
count local enhancements.
Correct.
Thank
So when we do the coverage testing, we program the radios. We don't look for any add-on towers. It's all the baseline system. And all areas, the reason you have add-on towers is to try to cover for the dots, especially for in-building coverage. So it only gets better. Any questions on the map?
This may not be, if you want to keep that up there for a second, Melvin, this may not be something that you would know, but obviously most of these areas and stuff that are in the gray that you haven't been able to get to, like what you pointed out there in southwest Iowa, most of the stuff is rivers and the Los Hills out there in the west and the lakes and things like that. The one that I'm questioning is the one that's on the southern border of Fayette and Dubuque County. It just seems to run along both those borders. There's a gray area that runs along both those borders there. What's there? Does anybody know?
That's what I was thinking too.
That you can't get to?
I'm not sure what county is that? Back up.
2 down over on the upper right.
Yep.
Which county?
The upper right, Fayette and Clayton County.
Northern Delaware, northern Buchanan.
Right along those county borders.
Fayette County, and which was the other one?
Clayton County, right next to it.
Oh, these 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you go back to your coverage map.
These 2.
Right. So along their southern borders.
Down here?
Yeah. What is
a lot
that?
of time, when we started this process, I actually took one county for myself. I kind of wanted a little bit of the pain to experience that, get with the guys too. But a lot of times, it's either farming or private property that we can't get into, you know, the tile makes it right at the edge, and you just can't get into, the road won't make it all the way in. So a lot of times there's just either not a drivable road or it's private property that we can get into. In other cases, when I did it, I just ran into roads that would have been drivable, but that there's a stream that nearby or a lake that nearby and just overflowed and it just covered the road with water, so we didn't go in there.
I'm from that part of the state too. There's actually quite a few level B roads up there, which are difficult to navigate.
Sure. So everything else and stuff kind of is tied to a natural, you know, that you can tell by the map, I mean, except for right along those 2 borders is all. That's why I didn't know if you knew that off the top of your head.
Correct.
So.
Correct. It's odd how it lines up, but you know, you can even see it over here where there's areas in here that,
right.
Why is that? But just how it turns out to be. Down here, I believe there's either an armory or something down here, some sort of a military something down here. But most of it is terrain related, no roads or farmlands. And sometimes you'll hit the road right at the edge, but not enough to get into that area, so you end up with big squares that look like that.
That's all I had. Go ahead, Melvin, if you're
Okay.
ready to finish your one.
All right, so the next thing is we're going to start delivered audio quality testing, which is the Can You Hear Me Now? So we're going to start that next week. We did the capital area here yesterday with Sergeant Hove, and we did that because we want to do not only just actually get it done, but we also wanted somebody to see the process from the beginning to the end. How do we set up the radios? How do we gather all the data? How do we merge the data? And then we had him sit in our office and evaluate 100 tiles, which is really 2 inbound and outbound, so you have to double that. And he evaluated every single one, and then we took that and transported it into a map so that he can see the overall approach. So our goal is to start this next week. We're looking at starting with 5 teams at first, make sure everybody feels comfortable with it, and then we're going to start increasing more. Beyond that, we have to execute the assessment test plan. So we have the approved ATP. We provided it, and it's been approved. So now what we're doing is trying to figure out how do we want to do it in terms of not affecting local traffic on the system, because the system is being used. So we want to make sure that we do it in such a way so that when we do, because some of the tests are intrusive, so we want to make sure that when we group those together so that a particular week we say, well, we're going to do these intrusive tests, so we notify everybody that we're going to do this so that no one panics when they see a glitch or a red X or something. Yes.
Can you elaborate a little bit about the acceptance testing? That's not just coverage, that's actually specific features of the system, right?
Correct. So we do dispatch calls, radio calls, multi-group calls, emergency calls, reroute traffic, break a path and watch the traffic be rerouted a different path, switch from the cores so that we can simulate a failure in one core and have all the data rerouted to the other core. So those are the ones that I consider more intrusive, that you get a blip and then it comes back up again, so all of those kinds of tests. So it's really feature functionality type stuff. So it's beyond the coverage. And then the final site walks. Right now we are working with the teams to clean up the sites, get any debris that are left over, pallets, broken down pallets, leftover materials, stuff like that. So it'll be great to walk the site when it's dry. That's all I had. Any questions?
Yeah, Melvin, I have, unrelated to the project, but related to the project. For the UGC, and I'm sure you've probably seen the new process that we're going through that's going to include at this point Motorola for the loading analysis, giving Motorola 30 days from the time that you folks receive the applicant participation plan to provide some sort of opinion. You'd indicated at a meeting a month or so ago that you need at least 2 weeks, so we're giving you 30 days. But from my point of view, is that something that you want me to send to you, or is there an engineer that needs to see that, or specifically who does that need to go to?
I think going forward, for the time being, we need to make sure that that goes to the customer support manager, and then he can figure out who that gets forwarded to.
It goes to Dan then?
That would be Dave Gordon.
Dave?
Dave, yeah.
Okay.
Because the reason for that is, believe it or not, we're becoming to a close very soon, right? And so we want to make sure that even if it ends up back on us, it still goes through that channel so that when we move on, that the front end remains the same and then he gets to send it to the appropriate person.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Melvin? Okay, thank you, Melvin.
Okay.
Dan, or I'm sorry, Dustin.
That's fine. Good morning. Some new sites to announce. Since May 17th, we've had 11 new sites. I can read those down for you. And I'll if I can bring a map at the July meeting, I'll do that. Let's see what legal tells me. 11 new sites. We had Ackley, Audubon, Centerville, Dixon, Eldora, Fairbank, Lone Tree, Manning, Riceville, Richland, and Washington. So all have 4G LTE, all have band 14. In addition to that, I was at part of that meeting on Tuesday for the subcommittee. Some sales personnel changes have been made this week. I will get those to Sean. I know our Danny Noble, who's in charge of our sales team, was calling Tom and Michelle. So in the interim, as they fill those positions, we'll get you who you need to call to this committee, to the subcommittee, and then we'll push it out in the newsletter. So, any questions?
Thank you, Dustin. Just a comment about the maps. I don't think the board's looking for anything as far as what is the specific lat and long of the site and which tower are you guys on, but just kind of a general geographic overview dot map of where some of the new sites are popping up, I think would be very beneficial. So I know where Ackley's at, but I don't know if everybody else necessarily knows off the top of the head where Ackley is located. So something like that would be really helpful because that really hits home as far as, hey, this is local. Of course, we're assuming that people know geography because all Iowa counties are square. But
Well, I didn't know where Richland was at, so I had to look up Richland.
Beautiful town.
So.
But that would be really helpful for the board to see and to know, and I think for the general stakeholders out there that they would like to see that when towers are up in their neighborhood too, because then it also gives them an idea of, okay, in terms of proximity and where we're going for operations planning, does this need to be taken into account? So I know there's some hesitance about the actual specific geographic location of tower sites, and I know there's some industry stuff that needs to be kept kind of quiet, but just a general dot map of a county would hopefully be agreeable to them.
Yeah, no, in this case, I think because Andy was at the FirstNet Summit and he gave a pretty detailed briefing for that. And then we had 5 new sites this week, so I came from Nebraska this morning, so I didn't have time to put them in a map, so. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Dustin. Jim.
Good morning. Couple of notes, things that may be of interest, and some of this will be a little more down in the weeds related to the All Hazards Communications Unit. The Interoperability Communications Advisory Council, which is working on changes to the communications unit structure, completed a 2-day meeting out in Sacramento yesterday. Preliminarily hearing that the FEMA NIC, which is the NIMS Integration Center, who's overall in charge of NIMS, will be taking a advisory stance with the work of the ICAC committee to study changes to the communications unit. They did not approve the recommendation to create a communications section or even a communications branch, but instead took it back under advisement and will use the ICAC along with the FEMA group to determine changes to NIMS. As I've reported previously, changes in NIMS happen at a glacial pace, and you can see what's happening. We're a little ahead of the curve with some of the planning and effort being made to develop changes specifically to incorporate the Information Technology Services Unit leader, but at least some movement is occurring. I was told that the Wildland Fire Group was particularly in favor of the change, which is good news. They've been somewhat reticent to see changes to their corporate structure in the past. Related to the All Hazards Communications Unit leader, I think I mentioned last month that there were some changes being brought forward as a result of the 2017 NIMS refresh. ECD will be delivering 2 classes in the next 6 weeks, one in Wichita and one in Los Angeles, where we will incorporate the new COML curriculum content. That pushes the class to 30 to 32 hours. What was a 24-hour class will be somewhat longer. We hope to trim that back a little bit, but we're starting with the FEMA contractor supplied content. In the case of what we're doing in Wichita, we're going to try to do this as a 10-hour day to see if we can compress the training and not ask for 4 days from student candidates. LA will be just the opposite. It'll be 4 8-hour days, and we're hoping that we'll be able to make some progress to compress this again. For those of you who are historians, we actually had a 4-day COML class for a short time when we spent what I considered countless hours drilling through what the FEMA Planning P was all about. Between the videos and the PowerPoint and the vest wearing, it was like going back to ICS 300 class for those of you who have enjoyed that. Meanwhile, the ITSL course update, we are continuing to make some progress with delivery on that. We're getting really good feedback from the IT community that we think we will be able to bring that class into a little bit tighter delivery. What was initially thought to be a 5-day class, like the COMT, the All Hazards Communications Technician, we're pushing to try to get that down to about 4 days. I had a multi-slide PowerPoint to show you what the ICS 205B looks like, but let's wait a couple of months. I'll show that to you at the appropriate time. I think you'll be intrigued because for those of us who are purists with the COM-L doctrine and the true ICS 205, the ICS 205A with the phone list and the 205B, which now includes the resource list for IT, including the help desk. I think Wally's seen it. It's pretty intriguing. We're actually bringing this together, and it does feel a lot like a family, if you will. Let me think, what else? We covered, Chris, I had to step out, and I think you were mentioning that the COM-L class that was requested, you were waiting feedback. I had a call with headquarters this morning. I just received the memo for the record that the course has been approved. We will need 15 students to conduct the class, and hopefully we can pull this off before the end of the calendar year, so we'll need to spin up something. I asked for flexibility so that we can maintain focus on getting your SCIP workshop done before we start promoting another TA. Iowa has previously had a couple of the tactical dispatch, or what we call interoperable tactical dispatch classes. On Monday, I participated in a call where we kicked off a tasking to U.S. Navy Information Warfare Command. That's our contractor, used to be called SPAWAR, to develop a train the trainer course so that this can be delivered locally. The intent is to bring that class, which we have a lot of pressure from the dispatch community that there's interest in the class. We just don't have the resources to deliver all the classes that are being brought forward, or asked that are being brought forward. So looking forward to doing something to bring that as a state-offered resource within the next year. Probably not as much of interest to Iowa, but just so you're aware, ECD has been leading a work group within SAFECOM and the National Council of Statewide Interoperability Coordinators to develop a next-generation 911 readiness checklist. This has been about a 1-year effort. It builds on the FCC's Task Force on Optimal PSAP architecture and is an interactive spreadsheet type of self-assessment tool. It's being briefed at NENA next week, and I'll be doing a pretty deep dive with State of Missouri next week at their governance meeting. Iowa and Kansas, frankly, are pretty well along and ahead of this process, but for those entities who are not as mature in developing a strategy to implement next gen, I think it's going to be a useful evolution. Just for awareness, if you haven't heard already, FEMA is going to do another National Emergency Alert System test on 7 August. This will be different from the last couple where we used IPAWS to push the messaging in a quick, rapid dissemination. And I think our latest numbers show that about 61% of people got the message via this little gadget last time. This one will be done without the use of the internet. We're going to push it over the old broadcast methodology using the FEMA primary stations. And this is actually a test of resiliency. What would you do if the only way we can get the message to the public is the old school way, which is broadcast messaging? And then it loops back to feed the other alert systems. So just announced August 7th, and more to come on that. Looking forward to supporting you on the cybersecurity awareness webinar and the upcoming technical assistance that Chris covered. Did you announce the dates for the SCIP workshop? I apologize that I had to step out.
No, I did not, actually.
I believe we had 9 and 10 September, the 2 days before the September board meeting, and my notes show location TBD still.
It'll probably be Des Moines.
Okay, in Greater Des Moines. So half-day sessions, the day, 2 days before and the day before, but the intent is to bring all of the activity that's coming out of the webinars for the working committees to drive that workshop, and then hopefully bring that to a close the day before the Isicsb meeting in September. So 9 and 10 September, Greater Des Moines. Read another little fun statistic this morning about cybersecurity, and I always try to close with ever vigilant. We had over 740 entities attacked yesterday in the state of, well, won't say the state, but let's just say that the vulnerabilities are numerous. Numbers still tell us 91% of attacks originate from phishing. Phishing, that's what you and I control by our actions and interactions with cyber and with email. 14 attacks, an attack happens now every 14 seconds in the US against an entity. And what I've been reading in the last week about public safety agencies who are being victimized keeps me awake at night. Still no impact to dispatch in the traditional sense, but the stuff is out there in the wild. There was a huge series of updates from Microsoft, Adobe, and others this week. Stay patched, stay vigilant, stay suspicious. Any questions for me? Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. All right, moving on. There's no old business to discuss, so we'll move on to the new business. Patrick, you want to take off here on the request for up to $2,000?
So back to the 700 meg air to ground channels. I think if you look at last month's report there, I had looked at 3 different coordination groups, if you will, looking for pricing on coordination of these 8 pairs. And so through our conversations with the finance committee, I had requested from them, or at least saw information on $2,000. The $2,000 would be a max expenditure, but I'm anticipating that it will be closer to $500. But the $2,000 is to provide a little bit of headroom just in case we hit a snag on the licensing. So idealistically, I'd like to see it land in the $500 mark. So I'm going to make a motion that the board approve $2,000 to license the 700 meg air to ground channels, not to exceed $2,000.
Okay. I'll second that. All right, thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Ellen. Is there any discussion, more discussion on the licensing of these channels? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of licensing these channels or the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you, Patrick. You want to take over again, or is John on the phone? All right.
I am on the phone.
John, go ahead. We're basically right there at your standards approval.
Yep, thank you. As I sure Vice Chair Ness discussed, we did bring 2 standards forward, the regional call audio and the appeal process standards that you see in front of you. As such, I would make a motion that the board approve the 2 standards as presented.
Okay. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Thank you, Mike. Any other discussion on these?
Yeah, I think it might be worthwhile to explain this call audio from a low-level technical standpoint. So I'm going to put Chris on the spot.
All right.
Thank you, Chair Updike. So the regional call audio standard really ties into a few other standards that we've passed as a board. And what this standard does is it takes that audio from the regional calling, and for the state-built assets, the state-built tower sites, it labels that audio as what's called critical in the system. So at that point, what that does is that every time someone transmits on the regional call, every state-built tower site will pass that audio out to the system regardless of whether there's a radio that's actively listening to it or not. And the reason you would want to do that is the way we've got our structures, our standards structured in such a way that we're putting critical and potentially life-saving announcements out on those regional calls for personnel to hear. if someone is scanning that audio or scanning that talk group, that ensures that they'll get that message. So in a sense, this is a standard where it's trying to convey as much critical information as possible that may be coming from an announcement out from a PSEP or dispatch center to in-field personnel. Where this plays into, if you look at some of our other standards, like our transport standard 1.5.1, where we compel the PSAPs to announce what might be life-saving information out to, say, transport vehicles. This is especially important because we can't necessarily guarantee that transport vehicle is going to have their radio set on the regional calling, but this ensures that if they have their radio set to scan it, they'll still get that information. Let's say that transport vehicle is heading on a county road or whatever, and then there's a report of a reckless or a drunk driver that's maybe in their general vicinity, or be on the lookout for this type of situation. It gets that information out much quicker to them, and then if eyes are made on whatever that object of interest or thing of interest is, that information can be relayed back a lot quicker. So this affects only state-built sites. For those sites that are added by local additions, like what has been done in some counties like Worth or Dallas County, this doesn't apply to them. They can opt in to have that audio forced also, but they don't have to. That's their infrastructure. They own it. They control it. If they want to participate in this, they absolutely can. They can also withdraw that participation at any time, and that's all spelled out in that standard as well. So the thought process here is that this will interface with several other standards that we have, like 1.5.1, 1.3, or 1.5.3, which is revolving around travel. It helps make the announcement standards that we have, 1.12.0, more effective.
Any questions on that?
I don't want to take up too much time. It'd be too technical, so.
Okay. So you're okay with that
Yeah.
explanation? Everybody else? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any other further discussion on this? Okay. Hearing none. All those in favor of passing of these two standards signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay. Motion passes. Thank you. On to the approval of state letters. Chair Buffington.
Yes, before you have three letters, one to the state of Minnesota, one to South Dakota, and one to Missouri that have been reviewed and approved by the user group committee. So I make a motion to approve these three letters and send them on to the respective states.
As they're written, Andy?
Yep. I'm sorry, what?
It says recently, like the one to. Is the one to Mr. Pierce. Recently, the user group, blah, blah, recently adopted. So I think you need to get rid of one recently. There's just two recentlys back to back.
An editorial change.
Otherwise, I'm happy with it. Boy, that jumped at me. Whoa.
Right.
Thank you.
All right, so noted.
All right. So Andy's making that change to his motion?
Yes.
Okay. Can I have a second for that?
Second.
All right, thanks, Marty. It's been moved and seconded. Any other further discussion on these three letters?
Change it in all the letters, I'm assuming, not just that one.
Correct. Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Andy, you still have the floor with the applicant process form.
Yeah, as you also with those materials is the new form. Essentially, what we're doing is requiring dates and signatures. You can see Roman numeral 4 is the loading analysis, and that starts the timeline for at this point Motorola to provide an opinion on loading analysis for each given applicant participation plan. So this comes as a motion to approve the user group committees and the Iowa Statewide Interoperable Communication Systems applicant process form.
Okay. Good moved. Okay, Ness is the second. Any further discussion on the process? Process and form.
Is this in addition to everything else that you're already doing with this process? I mean, you've got those spreadsheets where they fill out all of their technical information.
Well, what the intent behind this is a few different things. Number one, it's an accountability piece. So we know that the letter of intent, the memorandum of agreement, the applicant participation plan, that it's been received by someone that is going to sign off on it. And then as soon as we have to have the letter of intent, we have to have the MOA. Then when they submit the applicant participation plan, right now it comes to me. We throw it out, or we had been throwing it out during the UGC meetings, and that's where Motorola would provide some sort of opinion based on them seeing it, and they get it prior to the meeting, obviously. But what this does is that UGC is not even going to look at it until somebody from Motorola, again Motorola right now, they look at it, they provide an opinion. Within 30 days, if 30 days passes and they provide no opinion, we're going to assume everything's great, unless they come back and say, we need more time. Again, we've got 2 applicant participation plans out there, both for level 2, that have been going on 5 weeks now. So what this does is, again, it provides accountability. Somebody's going to sign their name to it. So at the end of the day, we have all of our I's dotted and T's crossed. It's a process thing, and just the way I like to do things.
What happens if Motorola never responds to any of them?
Well, then Motorola consents, and then so let's say there's a loading problem, and they never provided any analysis, they never did anything like that. Then I think it's going to have to become their baby. To make sure that those things are remedied. And we're getting that. Then we get into the fight. I mean, in all honesty, that's the reality of the situation. Because right now, level 1, there's discussion in our user group as level 1 users. Would we ever say no to a level 1 request? Because the system is built for interoperability. Now, granted, there's certain things we have to consider, whether it's TDMA, FDMA, things like that. In the MOA, it states that there's a waiver form for FDMA radios. Still have yet to find that. So little things like that have to be done. But what this does for me is that it provides a clear course of action from start to finish. And that way, we're not going to be jumping steps.
It's just an additional document. You're not getting rid of anything.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
This is the checks and balances for me and for anyone else.
And you are keeping this document. You're just.
Well, the intent is that it's going to go back to the Isicsb office, that this will accompany all the documentation. That's the intent. Yes, do I want a copy of it? Absolutely, I do, as UGC chair at this point. But right now, to be honest, it's pretty loose. There's
Check
not.
sheet. Yes,
absolutely.
that's been done. You got
Yes,
it.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Dave.
Patrick, I think we all really appreciate and applaud the work of UGC, but we also recognize it's an evolving process with more requests coming all the time. So this seems to me to be a way of making sure our processes are as efficient and as accountable as they can be, so that the users that have made application and are awaiting a response, so that we're quickly getting the information to Motorola. They're on a time schedule to get the information back, so that we, UGC and ultimately the Isicsb board, can give as timely and responsible reaction as we can to their requests.
Thank you, guys. Anything else? No other discussion? It's been moved and seconded for the applicant process form. There's no other discussion. Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. That is all the business that we have. Open up the floor for public comment. Nobody on the phone for public comment? All right. Hearing none. Hear a motion for adjournment. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We're adjourned.